You don't
Imagine
belong
being
here.
invited
How
somewhere not
could
to
you
be
do
celebrated,
this?
not to be acknowledged, but to be paraded as proof of someone else's power. That was the cruelty wrapped inside a cream-colored invitation handed to Petrona, a woman the corporate world had learned to overlook. But on that gala night, the woman they planned to mock walked in wearing a truth no one expected, and the silence that shattered the room would change everything. Welcome to Mr. Bryan's Tale, where every story takes you on an unforgettable journey. Whether it's thrilling adventures, heartwarming moments, or tales that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, this is your destination for captivating storytelling. If you love getting lost in exciting narratives and discovering new worlds with every video, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss out on the next amazing tale. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Imagine being invited some of the fluorescent lights of Wix Global Enterprises hummed their eternal song as Petrona pushed her cleaning cart down the 42nd floor corridor at 6:47 a.m. She had learned to love these early hours when the building still held its breath, before the executives arrived with their sharp heels and sharper words. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she wiped down the mahogany reception desk, her movements almost meditative. Once, these same hands had signed checks that built schools. Now they scrubbed the fingerprints of people who had forgotten she ever existed. She wore her invisibility like a second uniform, navy blue scrubs, hair pulled back in a neat bun, eyes that had learned to look without seeming to see. It was a skill she perfected over 3 years, the art of being present without being noticed. As she moved through the executive suite, she caught fragments of her former life in every corner. The abstract painting in the north hallway, she commissioned that from a young Ghanaian artist. The leather chairs in the conference room, she'd chosen that exact shade of cognac. But no one knew, no one remembered. That was the point. By 8:15, the building had come alive. Executives streamed from the elevators, their designer coffee cups and designer problems filling the air. Petrona continued her work, spraying and wiping the glass walls of the meeting rooms. A junior analyst nearly knocked her cart over without a word of apology. A paralegal threw a crumpled napkin in her direction, missing the trash bin by 3 feet and not bothering to correct the mistake. Petrona picked it up without expression. She had learned not to show what she felt. Survival required silence. Then she heard the footsteps she'd been anticipating and dreading in equal measure. Morrison Wicks emerged from the executive elevator, his tall frame somehow both commanding and weary, salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He moved with the confidence of a man who would build an empire, but there was something haunted in the set of his shoulders. Petrona kept her eyes on the glass she was cleaning, but her reflection betrayed her, a slight tensing of her jaw, the way her hand paused mid-wipe for just a fraction of a second. Morrison walked past, his stride purposeful, heading toward his corner office. Then he stopped. The entire hallway seemed to hold its breath. He turned his head slightly, as if he'd heard something, though neither of them had made a sound. Their eyes met the reflection of the glass wall between them. 4-3 heartbeats, maybe 4, the rest of the world fell away. His expression shifted. Pain, recognition. Something that looked almost like hope flickering across his features before he caught himself. Petrona saw it all. She always had been able to read him, even now, especially now. Morrison's hand lifted slightly, as if to reach toward the glass, toward her. Then his assistant called his name from down the hall, and the spell broke. He straightened his tie, the mask of the untouchable CO sliding back into place, and continued walking. But Petrona had seen the truth. He knew exactly who she was. He had always known. She returned to her cleaning, her heart pounding against her ribs like a prisoner demanding release. Some disappearances, she thought, were never quite complete, ere not to be celebrated, not to be acknowledged, but to be paraded as proof of someone else's power. That was the cruelty wrapped inside a cream-colored invitation handed to Petrona, a woman the corporate world had learned to overlook. But on that gala night, the woman they planned to mock walked in wearing a truth no one expected, and the silence that shattered the room would change everything. Welcome to Mr. Bryan's Tale, where every story takes you on an unforgettable journey. Whether it's thrilling adventures, heartwarming moments, or tales that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, this is your destination for captivating storytelling. If you love getting lost in exciting narratives and discovering new worlds with every video, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss out on the next amazing tale. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Benita Reyes arrived at 9:30 a.m., which he considered fashionably late, but everyone else recognized as barely showing up for work. She swept through the reception area trailing Chanel No. 5 in entitlement, her Louboutins clicking against the marble like a countdown to someone's humiliation. Today she wore cream, a power suit that probably cost what Petrona made in 6 months, accessorized with gold jewelry that screamed new money, trying desperately to sound like old. "You missed a spot," Benita announced to no one in particular, gesturing vaguely at a window that Petrona had cleaned to perfection 20 minutes earlier. The PR director didn't wait for a response. She never did. Acknowledgement would require seeing people as human, and Benita had built her entire identity on a hierarchy where she stood firmly at the top, looking down. Petrona watched in the corner of her eye as Benita stopped at the assistant's desk, launching into a story about her weekend in the Hamptons. Her voice carried. Everything about Benita carried, demanding attention like a child throwing a tantrum. She'd married Gerald Reyes 3 years ago, a board member 20 years her senior, with old family money and older family connections. The marriage had given Benita everything she'd ever wanted: access, status, and a weapon to wield against anyone she deemed beneath her. The sommelier actually tried to suggest a wine pairing. Benita laughed, loud enough for half the floor to hear. "Can you imagine? As if I haven't been drinking wine since before he learned to pronounce Chateauneuf du Pape." The assistants laughed on cue, their fear dressed up as amusement. Petrona moved to empty the trash bins near Benita's office, her presence as unremarkable as furniture. That's when she heard it. Benita on the phone with the event planner, discussing her upcoming charity gala at the Emerald Terrace. No, the ice sculpture should be larger. I want people to see it from across the room. This event is about making a statement. Darling, power recognizes power. Benita ended the call and turned, nearly colliding with Petrona. For a moment, irritation flashed across her face, the inconvenience of having to navigate around the help. Then something shifted. Her eyes narrowed with the calculation of a predator spotting prey, and a slow smile spread across her perfectly injected lips. "Well," Benita said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "don't you look dedicated? Tell me, how long have you been cleaning our floors?" She didn't wait for an answer. "I'm planning the most exclusive charity gala the city has seen. We're raising money for underprivileged women. Giving them opportunities they wouldn't normally have access to." The irony was so thick Petrona could taste it. Benita stepped closer, invading her space with practiced dominance. "I've just had the most wonderful idea. Diversity is so important at these events, don't you think? We should have representatives from all walks of life." Her smile turned razor-sharp. "You should come. It would be so inspiring." Petrona met her eyes, keeping her expression neutral. "That's very kind of you, Ms. Reyes." "Oh, kindness has nothing to do with it," Benita said, her voice dropping low enough that only Petrona could hear the cruelty underneath. "I just think it's important that people see the difference between those who belong and those who don't. Don't you agree?" She walked away, already pulling out her phone to share her brilliant idea with her circle of equally vicious friends. Behind her, Petrona's hands tightened around the handle of her cleaning cart. The game had begun, and Benita had no idea who she was really playing against. 3 days later, Benita struck during the morning rush when the 42nd floor buzzed with executives clutching their lattes and their importance. She had planned it perfectly. 11 a.m., right when people took their coffee breaks, when the maximum number of witnesses would be present to watch her performance. Petrona was wiping down the water cooler near the central atrium when she heard Benita's voice ring out like a bell announcing execution. "Oh, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." The chatter around the coffee station died. Heads turned. Benita never looked for the cleaning staff. She barely acknowledged they existed. This was theater, and everyone sensed they were about to become the audience. Benita glided across the floor, holding an envelope like it was the Hope Diamond. Behind her, 3 of her usual entourage followed, women who had learned that proximity to Benita's cruelty was safer than being its target. A small crowd began to gather, executives pausing mid-conversation, assistants pretending to check their phones while watching from the corners of their eyes. "I wanted to do this publicly," Benita announced, her voice projecting to every corner of the atrium, "because I believe in transparency and inclusion." She held up the cream-colored envelope, letting the light catch the gold embossing. "As many of you know, I'm hosting a charity gala at the Emerald Terrace next Saturday. It's a $500 plate event benefiting underprivileged women." Someone in the crowd murmured appreciation. Benita smiled, feeding off the attention. "But what good is charity if we only preach to converted? If we only surround ourselves with people exactly like us?" She turned to Petrona, who had stopped cleaning, and stood perfectly still, her dignity the only armor she had left. "That's why I'm personally inviting our hard-working cleaning staff to attend, to give everyone a chance to see how the other half lives." The silence that followed was excruciating. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Most just stared, waiting to see what would happen next. Morrison's assistant, Stanley, stood near the back of the crowd, his jaw clenched so tight it could crack diamonds. Benita extended the invitation toward Petrona with exaggerated grace, like a queen bestowing favor upon a peasant. "We'd be honored to have you join us. It's black tie, of course, but I'm sure you can find something appropriate. There are some lovely rental places downtown that aren't too expensive." Her friends tittered behind their hands. Every eye in that atrium was on Petrona. This was the moment Benita had orchestrated, the moment of maximum humiliation, where refusing would seem ungrateful and accepting would mark her as the evening's entertainment, a living example of charity in action. Petrona reached out and took the invitation, her hand steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. She looked directly at Benita, her voice calm and clear enough for everyone to hear. "Thank you, Ms. Reyes. How very thoughtful of you." Benita's smile widened, victory gleaming in her eyes. "Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I do hope you'll come. It would mean so much to see you there." She paused, letting the knife twist one more time. "Just try not to wear your uniform, We want you to feel like a guest, not to help." Laughter rippled through Benita's inner circle. The rest of the crowd dispersed quickly, embarrassed to have witnessed such calculated cruelty, relieved it wasn't aimed at them. Within minutes, the atrium had cleared, leaving Petrona standing alone with the cream-colored invitation in her hands, a weapon disguised as kindness, an execution dressed up as inclusion. She looked down at the elegant script, at Benita's name embossed in gold at the bottom. Then, slowly, deliberately, she slipped it into her pocket and returned to her cleaning cart. Her hands didn't shake. Her expression didn't crack. But something inside her had shifted, a decision made in the space between heartbeats. Benita Reyes had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She just didn't know it yet. The supply closet on the 42nd floor smelled like industrial cleaner and old paper, a small windowless room where Petrona had learned to take her breaks away from prying eyes. She locked the door behind her and finally let her hands shake, the tremor spreading through her fingers like aftershocks from an earthquake she'd been holding inside. The cream-colored invitation sat on the metal shelf next to bottles of glass cleaner, mocking her with its elegant script and expensive paper stock. Petrona pressed her palms against the cool concrete wall and let herself break, just for a moment. The tears came hot and angry, 3 years of swallowed humiliation pouring out in silent sobs that shook her shoulders. She had convinced herself that invisibility was safety, that smallness was survival. But Benita had found her anyway, had turned her into a spectacle, a cautionary tale about knowing one's place. She slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the wall, and covered her face with her hands. This was the price of hiding. Eventually, someone would find you and remind you why you disappeared in the first place. The world didn't let you rest. It didn't let you heal. It just kept taking and taking until there was nothing left. Her breathing slowly steadied. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked around the cramped space that had become her refuge. Shelves lined with supplies, boxes of old paperwork waiting to be shredded, the detritus of corporate life that no one important ever saw. Her gaze landed on a cardboard box in the corner, one she'd shoved a month ago and forgotten about. Archived material someone had asked her to dispose of. Something made her pull it closer. Inside were old company newsletters, annual reports, promotion materials from 5, 6, 7 years ago. She began sorting through them mechanically, a distraction from the ache in her chest. Then her hands froze. The newsletter was from 8 years ago. The paper slightly yellow, but the photograph still crisp and clear. There she was, Petrona Wicks in a sapphire dress that had cost more than she wanted to remember, standing next to Morrison in front of the newly constructed Wicks Children's Hospital. They were both holding oversized scissors, mid-cut through a red ribbon, laughing at something someone had said off-camera. She looked radiant, powerful, alive. The caption underneath read, "Power couple gives back. Morrison and Petrona Wicks open state-of-the-art children's hospital." Petrona stared at the photograph, at the woman she used to be. That woman had commanded rooms. That woman had moved millions of dollars to causes that mattered. That woman had walked beside Morrison as an equal, had built an empire of compassion alongside his empire of commerce. What had happened to her? She knew the answer. Betrayal had happened. Heartbreak had happened. She had let it consume her, had let it convince her that she deserved to disappear. But looking at that photograph now, at the smile on her younger self's face, Petrona felt something shift. That woman wasn't gone. She was just buried, and Benita Reyes, in her infinite arrogance, had just given her a reason to dig herself back up. Petrona stood slowly, the newsletter still in her hand. She looked at the invitation on the shelf, then back at the photograph. A smile, small, dangerous, determined, curved across her lips. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a number she hadn't called in 3 years, her finger hovering over Stanley's name. The decision crystallized in that moment, sharp and clear as broken glass. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She wasn't going to let Benita parade her as proof of her own superiority. She was going to that gala, but not as the entertainment, as the reckoning. She pressed call. Petrona called Stanley, Morrison's executive assistant, who had protected her secret for 3 years. He's been waiting for this moment. "It's about time, Mrs. Wicks," he says. They begin planning Operation Restoration. 4:34 a.m. Stanley answered on the second ring, his voice cautious in the way it always was when he saw her number. "Petrona?" She took a breath, steadying herself. "Stanley, I need your help." There was a pause. Then she heard him moving, presumably closing his office door. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, warmer, more familiar, the voice of the man who had been her assistant before he became Morrison's, who had watched her world crumble and had never once betrayed her trust. "It's about time, Mrs. Wicks." The title hit her like a wave. Mrs. Wicks. She hadn't heard anyone call her that in 3 years, hadn't allowed herself to remember that technically, legally, she still was. The divorce papers had been drawn up, but never signed. Sitting in a lawyer's office gathering dust alongside all the other things she left unfinished when she walked away. "You knew," she said softly. "It wasn't a question. That Benita invited you to humiliate you at her gala? The whole building knows by now. She's been telling anyone who'll listen about her social experiment." Stanley's disgust was palpable through the phone. "I've been waiting 3 years for you to fight back. What changed?" Petrona looked down at the newsletter in her hand, at the woman in the sapphire dress who used to change the world before breakfast. "I remembered who I am." "Good." She could hear the smile in Stanley's voice. "Because I've been keeping a few things safe for you. What do you need?" They talked for 20 minutes. Stanley pacing his office, while Petrona sat on the supply closet floor, their voices low and conspiratorial. He had kept everything, her contacts, her access codes to accounts she thought closed, even the key to the storage unit where she'd box up her former life in a grief-fueled purge. He'd been protecting her secrets, waiting for the day she'd need them again. "The emerald gown," Stanley said thoughtfully. "The one from the governor's ball. Do you still have it?" "It's in storage." "But Stanley, that was years ago." "I'm not." "You're more beautiful now than you were then," he interrupted firmly. Stronger, too. You survived 3 years as a ghost in your own building. You think wearing a dress is going to be the hard part. Petrona felt a laugh bubble up, unexpected and real. When did you become so dramatic? I learned from the best. You used to plan charity galas that made grown men cry and write checks they couldn't afford. This is just another event. Mrs. Wicks. Except this time, you're not the host. His voice turned serious. You're the reveal. They began sketching out the plan. Stanley would arrange access to the storage unit, would contact her former stylist, a woman named Grace who had dressed Petrona for every major event and who, according to Stanley, still asked about her. He would handle the logistics, the details, the careful choreography required to pull off what they were now calling Operation Restoration. Morrison. Petrona said finally, the name heavy on her tongue. Does he know you've been in contact with me? Stanley's silence answered before his words did. He knows you're here. In the building. He's always known. He sees you every day and it breaks him every time, but he respects your choice to keep your distance. A pause. He's going to be at the gala. Board members are required to attend Benita's little circus. Good, Petrona said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. He should be there. They all should. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget, Stanley said. Welcome back, Mrs. Wicks. Petrona visits her storage unit for the first time in years. Inside, her life before. Designer gowns, awards, photo albums. She tries on her old identity and realizes it still fits. But differently now. She's stronger for having survived without it. 4:35 a.m. The storage facility sat on the edge of the city, a gray building that held other people's past in climate-controlled boxes. Petrona stood in front of Unit 237 with Stanley beside her, the key trembling slightly in her hand. 3 years. She hadn't opened this door in 3 years. I can wait in the car, Stanley offered quietly. She shook her head. No, I need a witness. Otherwise, I might convince myself this is all a dream. The lock clicked open, and the door rolled up with a mechanical groan. Fluorescent light spilled into the unit, illuminating carefully labeled boxes stacked against the walls. Stanley flipped on the overhead light, and Petrona stepped inside, her breath catching. It was all here. Everything she'd stripped from her life in one frantic weekend. Unable to bear the weight of what she'd lost. Garment bags hung along one wall, their contents visible through clear plastic, silk velvet, beading that caught the light. Boxes labeled awards and photos and documents sat in neat rows. A vanity mirror leaned against the back wall, the same one where she used to prepare for events that shaped policy and moved money toward justice. Petrona moved toward the garment bags like a woman in a trance. Her fingers found the emerald gown Stanley had mentioned, and she unzipped the bag slowly. The dress spilled out, somehow more beautiful than she remembered. Floor-length silk that shimmered between green and gold depending on how the light hit it. She had worn this to meet ambassadors and celebrities, had danced with Morrison under chandeliers while photographers captured their perfect life. Try it on, Stanley urged gently. She hesitated, then slipped behind a stack of boxes for privacy. The dress slid over her body like memory, the silk cool against her skin. She had expected it not to fit, for 3 years of physical labor to have changed her shape beyond recognition. But the zipper closed smoothly, the fabric settling against her curves as if it had been waiting. Petrona stepped out and caught a reflection in the vanity mirror Stanley had propped up. She stared at the woman looking back. Same face, same eyes, but something fundamental had shifted. The woman in this dress 3 years ago had been powerful but fragile. Her identity so wrapped up in Morrison and his world that losing him had nearly destroyed her. The woman wearing it now had scrubbed floors and swallowed pride and survived invisibility. She had rebuilt herself from nothing, even if that rebuilding looked like retreat. She was harder now, wiser, unbreakable in ways her younger self had never been. It fits, she whispered. Stanley smiled, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Better than before, Mrs. Wicks, because now you know you don't need it. You're wearing the dress. The dress isn't wearing you. Petrona turned slowly, watching the fabric catch the light, and felt something long dormant unfurl inside her chest. Not the woman she used to be, Not the woman she'd been forced to become. Someone new. Someone who contained multitudes. Someone ready for war. Grace Chen's studio occupied the third floor of converted brownstone in the Arts District, the same space where she had dressed Petrona for dozens of events in another lifetime. When Petrona walked through the door with Stanley, Grace looked up from her sketching table and froze, her pencil clattering to the floor. "Oh, my God!" Grace's hand flew to her mouth. "Petrona?" Then she was moving, crossing the studio in quick steps and pulling Petrona into an embrace that smelled like fabric softener and expensive perfume. Petrona felt herself stiffen. She'd forgotten how to accept affection, how to let people close enough to care. But Grace held on, fierce and certain, until Petrona's shoulders finally relaxed. 3 years, Grace said, pulling back to look at her properly. 3 years and not even a phone call. I thought you were dead. I thought... Her voice cracked. She steadied herself, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Why didn't you call? I couldn't be that person anymore, Petrona said simply. I had to disappear. Grace studied her face, reading the years of pain and survival written there. And now someone's tried to make me into a joke, and I'm going to remind them who I am. A slow smile spread across Grace's face, the kind of smile that meant trouble and transformation in equal measure. Stanley told me about the gala, about that vicious woman and her poisoned invitation. She walked to her design wall, where fabric swatches and sketches bloomed like a garden. We're not just dressing you for a party, Petrona. We're armoring you for battle. They spent the next 2 hours in a dance Petrona had almost forgotten. Grace pulling garments, Petrona considering and rejecting, the two of them speaking in the shorthand of long friendship. Grace had kept up with fashion's evolution, but she remembered Petrona's style, her preferences, the way certain colors made her skin glow. The emerald, Grace said finally, pulling out the gown from storage. She held it up to the light, examining construction with a critical eye. This is the one. I remember when we chose this fabric. Morrison couldn't take his eyes off you. Petrona touched the silk, memory flooding back. Morrison loved her in emerald. He'd told her once that it made her look like royalty, like she'd stepped out of a painting. He'll be there, she said quietly. At the gala, Grace met her eyes in the mirror. Good. Let him remember what he lost. Let them all remember. She began making notes, talking about alterations and accessories. We'll update the styling, more modern, more powerful. Hair up to show your face. Minimal jewelry. You won't hide behind anything. I don't want to hide anymore, Petrona said. Grace squeezed her shoulder. Then let's show them exactly who you are. Let's show them the queen they tried to erase. The Emerald Terrace is magnificent. Benita reigns as queen of the evening, her charity gala raising funds for underprivileged women. The irony is lost on no one who knows what she's planned. Morrison is there, distant and sad, clearly attending out of obligation. 4:37 a.m. The Emerald Terrace lived up to its name, a sprawling venue of glass and greenery perched on the city's waterfront, like a jewel waiting to be admired. Tonight it glittered with 500 of the city's most influential people, their combined net worth probably equal to a small nation's GDP. Crystal chandeliers caught the light of 1,000 candles, casting shadows that danced across marble floors. White glove servers circulated with champagne, and canapes that cost more per bite than most people spent on dinner. Benita Reyes stood at the center of it all, resplendent in a white gown that screamed bridal elegance at someone else's event. She held court near the silent auction display, her laugh carrying across the room as she accepted compliments on the decor, the venue, her vision for helping women who needed a hand up, not a handout. The irony was apparently lost on her, though several guests exchanged knowing glances. Everyone who mattered had heard about her invitation to the cleaning woman. Some found it distasteful. Most found it entertaining. None of them spoke up. The ice sculpture alone cost $15,000. Benita announced to a cluster of admirers. But you can't put a price on making a statement about excellence. Near the bar, Morrison Wicks nursed a scotch and wished he were anywhere else. He'd worn the obligatory tuxedo, made the obligatory donation. $25,000 to Benita's cause, whatever it actually was this week. His presence was required as a board member, but his heart wasn't in it. His heart hadn't been in much of anything for 3 years. Stanley approached with a fresh drink Morrison hadn't requested. "Sir, you should probably stay close to the entrance for the next little while." Morrison looked at his assistant with tired confusion. "Why?" Stanley's expression remained professionally neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Anticipation, perhaps, or satisfaction. "Just a feeling, sir. I think the evening is about to get interesting." Across the room, Benita checked her watch and smiled. 9:30. Her little social experiment definitely wasn't coming. She probably realized how foolish she'd look, showing up to an event so clearly beyond her station. Benita had won before the game even started. She raised her champagne glass, basking in her perfect evening, completely unaware that outside, a town car was pulling up to the entrance. Inside it, a woman in an emerald gown was taking one last deep breath, preparing to shatter Benita's perfect world into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The entrance doors to the Emerald Terrace opened at exactly 9:47 p.m., and the woman who stepped through them stopped time itself. Petrona Wick's moved like water finding its level, each step deliberate and unhurried. The emerald gown caught the chandelier light and held it, the silk flowing around her body like liquid gold-green fire. Grace had swept her hair into an elegant updo that showcased the graceful lines of her neck and the diamond earrings that had been a wedding gift from Morrison's grandmother. Her makeup was flawless but understated. She didn't need artifice. Her presence was enough. The first person to notice was a server who nearly dropped his tray of champagne. Then a woman near the entrance turned, her conversation dying mid-sentence. The silence spread like ripples in water, each person who looked toward the door falling quiet, nudging their neighbor, pointing subtly or not so subtly. Petrona didn't rush. She let them look, let them see. She moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who had once commanded rooms exactly like this one, who had raised millions with a smile and a handshake, who had never forgotten how to be powerful even when she'd chosen to be invisible. Near the silent auction, Benita's laugh cut off as if someone had severed her vocal cords. She turned, following the collective gaze of her guests, and the champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, the sound impossibly loud in the growing silence. Her face drained of color, shock and confusion warring with the first creeping edge of fear. This wasn't possible. The cleaning woman didn't look like this. Couldn't look like this. This woman moved like royalty, dripped elegance and money and power. This woman looked like she belonged here more than Benita herself. At the bar, Morrison's Scotch glass hit the counter with a crack. He stared, his face cycling through disbelief, recognition, pain, and something that looked dangerously close to hope. His lips formed a single word, barely audible. Petrona. The room held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And Petrona, standing in the center of it all, finally allowed herself to smile. Councilwoman Patricia Martinez, who worked with Petrona on education initiatives years ago, recognizes her and says her name aloud. Others begin to remember. Didn't she disappear? Where has she been? That's Morrison Wick's wife. 4:40 a.m. The silence shattered when Councilwoman Patricia Martinez gasped audibly from across the room. She was a woman in her 60s who had spent 3 decades in city politics and never forgot a face, especially one that had helped her build 2 community centers and a literacy program that still bore both their names. "My God!" Patricia's voice rang out clear and certain. "Petrona Wicks? Is that really you?" The name detonated like a bomb in the hushed space. Heads swiveled between Patricia and the woman in emerald. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Petrona Wicks? That can't be the Petrona Wicks?" An older gentleman near the bar, a hospital administrator, stepped forward, recognition dawning on his weathered face. "The Children's Hospital. You opened the Children's Hospital with your husband. I was there. I remember the ceremony." More voices joined, memory clicking into place for those who had been part of the city's philanthropic circles years ago. A museum curator, a university dean, a nonprofit director who had received a grant from the Wicks Foundation. "She disappeared 3 years ago," someone murmured. "Just vanished after some scandal." "No, there was no scandal. She just left. That's Morrison Wick's wife. Wait, they're still married? Where has she been? The questions tumbled over each other, building momentum. Benita stood frozen, her perfect evening disintegrating around her like sand through desperate fingers. Her brain struggled to process what was happening. The cleaning woman was Petrona Wicks? The Petrona Wicks who had opened schools and hospitals, who had been photographed with governors and senators, whose foundation had moved tens of millions of dollars. Patricia was already moving through the crowd toward Petrona, her face lit with genuine joy. My dear, we thought you were gone forever. The literacy program still runs in your name. Those children, you changed so many lives. Petrona embraced Patricia warmly, her voice carrying across the room. I never left the city. Patricia, I've been here all along, just taking a different perspective on things. Across the room, Morrison took a shaky step forward, his carefully constructed walls crumbling as every eye in the venue turned between the woman in emerald and the CEO who had never remarried, who still wore his wedding ring, who had apparently been searching for his wife in the face of a cleaning woman for 3 long years. Morrison crosses the room, his face a mixture of shock, pain, and something else. Hope. Before he reaches her, Petrona speaks to the crowd, thanking them for the reminder of her worth. She turns to Benita. Thank you for the invitation. It helped me remember who I am. 4:40 a.m. Morrison moved through the crowd like a man in a dream, his eyes never leaving Petrona's face. 3 years of grief and longing and unanswered questions propelled him forward, but before he could reach her, Petrona raised her hand gently, a gesture that stopped him in his tracks. Not yet. She had something to say first. The room fell silent again, every guest riveted by the unfolding drama. Petrona turned slowly, taking in the faces around her, some familiar, some new, all watching her with varying degrees of shock and fascination. Thank you all for the warm recognition, she said, her voice clear and steady, carrying the authority of someone who had once commanded rooms like this with ease. I've been away from this world for a while, but tonight reminded me of something important. You can change your circumstances, your address, even your daily routine, but you can't change who you fundamentally are. She paused, letting her words settle over the crowd. Then her gaze found Benita, who stood trembling near the shattered champagne glass, her white gown and her confidence both irreparably stained. Petrona crossed the distance between them with measured steps. She stopped directly in front of Benita, close enough that her next words were clearly audible, but delivered with devastating quiet dignity. Thank you, Ms. Reyes, for the invitation. Petrona's smile was genuine, which somehow made it more lethal. You meant it as a weapon, I know, a way to remind me of my place, to humiliate me in front of your friends. She glanced around at the staring crowd. But instead, you gave me something much more valuable. You reminded me who I am. You forced me to remember that I am not defined by my uniform or my circumstances. I am Petrona Wicks, and I built hospitals while you were still learning which fork to use at dinner. Benita's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, a fish drowning in air. So truly, Petrona continued, thank you. This evening has been enlightening. She turned away from Benita as if the woman had ceased to exist, and finally, she let herself look at Morrison. His face was raw with emotion, tears tracking down his cheeks, his hand extended toward her like a man reaching for salvation. Hello, Morrison, Petrona said softly. I think we need to talk. Gerald Reyes materialized at his wife's side within moments, his face mottled red with fury and humiliation. He gripped Benita's elbow with barely restrained force and began steering her toward the exit without a word. Benita tried to protest, to salvage something from the wreckage, but her husband's expression silenced her more effectively than any reprimand. We're leaving, Gerald hissed. And tomorrow you're resigning from every committee, every board, every position you've wormed your way into using my name. Do you understand what you've done? Their departure was watched by 500 pairs of eyes, each witness to the complete destruction of Benita's carefully constructed social empire. The whispers had already started. Phones were already out, the story already spreading to the city's elite circles like poison in reverse, a cleansing rather than a contamination. Morrison led Petrona to a private terrace overlooking the water, away from the curious stares and the din of shocked conversation. The night air was cool, carrying the salt scent of the harbor. For a long moment, they stood in silence, years of unsaid words hanging between them like fog. Why? Morrison's voice broke on the single syllable. Why did you leave like that? Why didn't you tell me where you were? Petrona looked out at the dark water, gathering her thoughts. Do you remember the night of the merger celebration? When your business partner told me I was good for your image and you laughed. When your mother said I should focus on being decorative and leave the real work to you. Morrison's face crumpled. Petrona, You never defended me, she continued quietly. You never saw how that world was crushing me, turning me into an accessory. A beautiful charity project that made you look good. She turned to face him. And then I found out about the offshore accounts, the deals made behind my back with foundation money, the way you let your board treat our mission like a tax shelter. I was trying to protect the company. You were protecting yourself, Petrona said firmly, and I realized I had become invisible even to you. So I made it official. I disappeared. Morrison reached for her hand hesitantly. She let him take it, felt the familiar warmth of his palm against hers. I see you now, he whispered. God help me. I've seen you every single day for 3 years. I knew it was you. I just didn't know how to reach across the distance I created. Benita is escorted out by her mortified husband, her social standing obliterated. Morrison and Petrona finally speak privately. She tells him why she left. Betrayal, pain, the toxic world that made her feel like an accessory. He listens, really listens, for perhaps the first time. 4:42 a.m. Gerald Reyes materialized at his wife's side within moments, his face mottled red with fury and humiliation. He gripped Benita's elbow with barely restrained force and began steering her toward the exit without a word. Benita tried to protest, to salvage something from the wreckage, but her husband's expression silenced her more effectively than any reprimand. We're leaving, Gerald hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. And tomorrow you're resigning from every committee, every board, every position you've wormed your way into using my name. Do you understand what you've done? You humiliated the wife of our CEO. You turned our company's founder into your personal entertainment. Their departure was watched by 500 pairs of eyes. Each witnessed the complete destruction of Benita's carefully constructed social empire. The whispers had already started. Phones were already out. The story already spreading through the city's elite circles like wildfire, a cautionary tale about hubris and cruelty, about what happens when you mistake position for power. Morrison led Petrona to a private terrace overlooking the water, away from the curious stares and the din of shocked conversation. Stanley appeared briefly with 2 glasses of wine, then disappeared like smoke, leaving them alone. The night air was cool, carrying the salt scent of the harbor. For a long moment, they stood in silence, years of unsaid words hanging between them like ghosts. Why? Morrison's voice broke on the single syllable. Why did you leave like that? Why didn't you tell me where you were? I looked everywhere. I hired investigators. His voice cracked. I thought you might be dead. Petrona looked out at the dark water, gathering her thoughts, choosing her words with the care of someone who had spent 3 years rehearsing this conversation in her head. Do you remember the night of the Riverside merger celebration? When David Hartwell told me I was good for your image and you laughed? When your mother said I should focus on being decorative and leave the real work to the men in the room? Morrison's face crumpled with recognition and shame. Petrona, I never meant. You never defended me, she continued, her voice steady but weighted with old pain. Not once. Not when your board dismissed my foundation work as a hobby. Not when they redirected funds I'd raised to projects I never approved. Not when I discovered you'd signed off on using our charity as a tax shelter for your business partners. She turned to face him fully. You never saw how that world was crushing me, Morrison. How it was turning me from a partner into a prop. A beautiful charity case that made Morrison Wicks look philanthropic and progressive. I was trying to protect the company, he said weakly. You were protecting your comfort, Petrona corrected. Your position. Your world where everything ran smoothly as long as I smiled and stayed quiet. She took a breath. I realized I had become invisible even to you, the one person who was supposed to see me. So I made it literal. I disappeared. Morrison's hand shook as he set down his wine glass. I see you now. God, Petrona, I've seen you every single day for 3 years. I knew it was you the first week you started working there. I recognize your hands, the way you move, everything. I just didn't know how to cross the distance I created. Every morning I'd see you and think, today I'll talk to her. But what could I possibly say? How could I possibly apologize for making you feel like you had to erase yourself? Petrona studied his face, seeing the truth of his words and the tears that wouldn't stop falling, and the way his entire body seemed to curve toward her like a plant seeking light after years in darkness. She didn't forgive him. Not yet. Forgiveness was a process, not a moment. But she saw something she hadn't seen before, genuine remorse and, more importantly, genuine change. I'm not coming back to the penthouse, she said quietly. I'm not stepping back into the life we had, Morrison. That woman is gone. She had to die so I could become who I am now. I know, he whispered. I don't deserve you back. I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. And I never will. Petrona reached up and touched his face gently, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than reconciliation. Then prove it, not with words or grand gestures. Prove it by becoming the man I thought I married, the one who believed in justice and dignity for everyone, not just the people who could afford it. I will, Morrison said, however long it takes, whatever you need. She stepped back, putting space between them again. I'm starting a new foundation. Independent, funded by my half of everything we built together, the half I never touched when I left. I'm going to do the work I was always meant to do, without compromise this time. Let me help, he said immediately. Maybe, Petrona replied. Someday, if you earn it. She smiled then, small but genuine. But first, you're going to clean house at Wix Global, starting with making sure no one ever treats their staff the way Benita treated me. Because Morrison, I wasn't the only one she abused. I was just the one who could fight back. He nodded, understanding flooding his features. Consider it done. Inside, the gala had transformed from Benita's showcase into Petrona's impromptu welcome back party. Patricia Martinez had already cornered 3 major donors, discussing the revival of the Wix Foundation under Petrona's sole leadership. Stanley stood near the bar, wearing a smile that suggested he'd just won a bet with the universe itself. Petrona looked back at Morrison one more time. I forgave you for not seeing me 3 years ago, Morrison. Don't make me regret giving you the chance to see me now. Never again, he promised. I swear on everything I am, Petrona. Never again. She walked back into the ballroom alone, her head high, her emerald gown catching the light like victory made visible. The woman who had entered as a ghost had left as a queen, and everyone in that room, especially Benita Reyes, watching from her car as her husband drove them away in disgrace, would never forget the night they learned that you can bury a woman, ignore her, try to humiliate her, but you can never truly erase someone who knows her own worth. Petrona Wix had disappeared once by choice. This time, she was choosing to be seen, and the world would never be the same.
If this story moved you, if Petrona's journey from invisibility to reclamation resonated with your spirit, then you're in the right place. Here at Mr. Bryant's Tale, we believe that every person has a story worth telling, a dignity worth defending, and a power that can never truly be taken away, only temporarily forgotten. Subscribe to Mr. Bryant's Tale and join a community that celebrates resilience, redemption, and the quiet strength it takes to rise again after the world has tried to keep you down. Hit that like button if Petrona's transformation inspired you. Ring the notification bell so you never miss another story of triumph over adversity. Because here's the truth. You are not your circumstances. You are not your setbacks. You are not what others decide to see when they look at you. You are who you choose to become when you finally remember your own power. Welcome to Mr. Bryant's Tale, where every story reminds you that you were never meant to stay invisible. Subscribe now, and let's build something beautiful together.